The year is 640 BC. The 8-year-old prince Josiah ascends the throne of Judah after his father is assassinated, and he inherits a fractured kingdom under the weight of foreign dominion. Judah belongs to the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians had conquered or controlled all the major zones of power in the Near East by the mid-7th century BC, demonstrating a sophisticated but brutal administration. The Jewish nation would have remembered the devastating campaigns of King Sargon II, who systematically destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. The other world superpowers met similar fates at this time. In 689 BC, the Assyrian warlord Sennacherib razed the city of Babylon, subjugating its inhabitants to slavery and deportation. In 671 BC, the Egyptian capital of Memphis fell to Esarhaddon, successfully bending all kingdoms into Assyrian vassal states, from the Mediterranean up to the Persian Gulf. In this climate of foreign subjection, the young king Josiah was also under financial compulsion to pay tribute to Assyrian occupation, as yet another vassal ruler in a vast empire. The Assyrians leveraged cultural influence through the spread of syncretism, the blending of separate religious practices. This was a policy of control and subjugation that could successfully pacify a subjected people while eroding its religious identity. The practice of syncretism had gradually fused into Judah's local beliefs during the reign of King Manasseh, Josiah's grandfather. The Old Testament judges Manasseh in light of this context. Not only did he reign the longest of all the Davidic kings, but he also earned the infamous distinction of being the most wicked. Instead of rejecting Assyrian syncretism as his father Hezekiah had, Manasseh seemed to welcome it, setting the stage for what Josiah would later inherit. And as a vassal under Ashurbanipal, one of the greatest Assyrian kings, Manasseh was surely inclined to bend Judah's ritual practices to the customs of the empire that dominated it, creating something new altogether. As a result, the singular devotion to Yahweh according to the historic Mosaic custom was intentionally repressed and fell into sharp decline. Manasseh rebuilt the cultic high places that Hezekiah had destroyed a generation before. Within the sacred temple of Solomon itself, Manasseh installed images of the Asherah, which were Semitic variants of the Assyrian goddess of fertility and war, Ishtar. Manasseh further led the nation into moral decline by practicing divination and human sacrifice, offering up his own sons to the fire. One Jewish tradition further claims that he had the great prophet Isaiah executed for his condemnation of Judah's alignment with Assyria. For all of these reasons, the Old Testament unilaterally denounces Manasseh, saying, "The innocent blood he shed filled Jerusalem from one end to another." When Manasseh died in the year 642 BC, his dark age of religious idolatry was Josiah's inheritance. Multiple Jewish prophets became active at the turn of the monarchy, and each spoke a bold declaration in the face of the new king, saying that the land of Judah and Israel belonged to the covenant God of David and no other. But to prove this claim, God also promised the impossible. The destruction of Assyria's superpower capital, Nineveh, was imminent. The most well-fortified city in the world of its time would fall. The prophetic encouragement was clear. If Assyrian decline was soon to take place, then now was the time to act. Josiah would mature with a golden opportunity on his hands to rebel against a declining superpower and to undo what Manasseh had allowed to spread. When Josiah, son of Ammon, became king, Judah was a land shrouded in darkness. The immediate challenge facing the nation was a fractured priesthood. Solomon's temple, which had suffered over 50 years of neglect under Manasseh, was in a state of complete disrepair. Local cults and shrines influenced by Assyrian and Canaanite pantheism were widespread and culturally dominant. The worship of Baal and other syncretic deities had taken root in the high places and groves throughout Judah and Israel, but as an 8-year-old monarch, Josiah probably had a limited ability to act, or even understand, the gravity of the situation. However, something shifted a few years into Josiah's reign, setting off a chain reaction. According to 2 Chronicles, Josiah began to seek the God of his father David in the 8th year of his reign, when he was just 16 years old. The text doesn't explain how Josiah came to this conviction at such a young age, raising an important question. Who influenced Josiah to turn away from a culture dominated by syncretism? The key to understanding this issue lies in the multiple prophets whose ministries overlapped with Josiah's reign, as their writings help fill in important contextual gaps. The earliest prophetic influence was Zephaniah, son of Cushi. He and Josiah were distant cousins, both tracing their lineage back to Hezekiah, a king of Judah from the previous century. For this reason, Zephaniah may have been part of a minority that refrained from participating in Manasseh's religious policies, as his Hebrew name literally means, Yahweh has hidden. Zephaniah's royal lineage likely afforded him unique access to his cousin, the king. Beginning in the 630s BC, Zephaniah boldly addressed the corruption of the priesthood and the devotion of the people, an issue that could no longer be ignored. Let all things be totally consumed from the face of the earth. I shall remove the names of Baal from this place and the names of the priests, on those who fill the house of the Lord with ungodliness and deceit. Additionally, Zephaniah pronounced a prophetic judgment against the Assyrians, who still held significant influence over Judah at this time. He will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria. He will make Nineveh a desolation, a dry waste like the desert. This is the exultant city that lived securely, that said in her heart, I am, and there is no one else. What a desolation she has become. The fiery language of Zephaniah's prophecies would have likely challenged and sparked a shift in Josiah's young mind, igniting a conviction within him. Not only was his priesthood badly corrupted, but this God had promised the defeat of Assyria, which would spell liberation for Judah. If the prophet's words held truth, then it would not be far-fetched to suggest that Josiah was awakened to the real issue. Assyrian subjugation had been the result of Judah and Israel's idolatry. Repentance before the God of Zephaniah and liberation from Assyria were two things that were intertwined. If this was indeed in Josiah's mind, it perfectly aligns with what the Chronicles record happened next. In the 12th year of his reign, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places. They broke down the altars of the Baals in his presence, and Josiah cut down the carved images, crushing them to dust. These acts marked the beginning of Josiah's reforms, which he initiated at the age of 20 in 628 BC. Since these early acts were largely focused on Jerusalem, they indicate more of Josiah's personal, inward conviction. Changing the national consciousness of Judah, however, would prove to be a much greater challenge, given the deep syncretic influence left by Manasseh's works. This makes what happened the following year a monumental turning point in Josiah's world. In 627 BC, Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria, died. The death of Ashurbanipal is regarded by historians as the greatest catalyst of Assyria's rapid decline. Even though Ashurbanipal had consolidated power at the height of Neo-Assyrian dominance in the 660s, he failed to designate a clear successor to the throne. As a result, his two sons, Ashur-etil-ilani and Sinshar-ishkun, engaged in a bitter civil war that fractured central authority and devastated Assyrian control over its vassal states. Seizing this opportunity of a weakened central state, a successful rebellion quickly followed in Babylon, led by Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the father of Nebuchadnezzar II. Following suit, the Medes also broke free at this time under their crowned king, Cyaxares. Both Nabopolassar and Cyaxares would form an alliance as independent states to destroy and plunder Nineveh together, confirming the prophetic words that kicked off Josiah's reforms a year earlier. These uprisings would have been great encouragement to Josiah, as Assyrian military forces were diverted from the Levant and went northward to suppress these rebellions, greatly changing the political landscape. To add to Josiah's advantage, the prophet Jeremiah began his ministry in the same year, 627 BC, encouraging Josiah to complete what he had started. "Those who handle the law did not know me. The rulers transgressed against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after things that do not profit. In your time of trouble you say, 'Arise and save us.' But where are your gods that you made for yourself?" The prophetic influence of Jeremiah served as the driving force behind Josiah's expanded campaigns. It was not enough to purify only Jerusalem or even the southern kingdom of Judah. The Chronicles describe how Josiah extended his efforts into the former territory of the northern tribes of Israel, symbolically cleansing the historic land of all 12 tribes. This would not have been possible unless the Assyrian strength in the region had been relocated to meet the threats in Babylonia, opening up an opportunity for Josiah to invade the north and emulate what he had achieved in the south, the complete eradication of non-Yahwistic devotion. After purging Israel's high places of priests, altars, and carved images, Josiah returned to Jerusalem to focus on repairing Solomon's temple. The culture was shifting. Fast forward to 622 BC. This is the 18th year of Josiah's reign, and perhaps the most important. At the age of 26, he commissioned repairs to Solomon's temple, enlisting the surviving Levitical priesthood to oversee its renovations. Chief among the renovators was Hilkiah, the high priest that year and the father of the prophet Jeremiah. Hilkiah was tasked by Josiah to audit the gold within the temple and use it as a resource to finance the renovations. During this audit, Hilkiah made a startling discovery. Among the forgotten artifacts in the temple was what is described as the Book of the Law. Though there is debate over what this text ultimately is, it is the scholarly majority that this recovered book was a prototype of Deuteronomy, the traditional retelling of the Mosaic laws and customs containing Israel's covenants with God. This book and its contents had inevitably been suppressed in Manasseh's reign, and its apparent discovery implies that the traditions of Moses had been nearly forgotten. In the wake of this shocking discovery, Hilkiah brought the book to Josiah, who had it read aloud in his presence. Now when Josiah heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. And the king commanded Hilkiah, "Go and inquire of the Lord for me concerning the words of this book that was found. For great is the wrath of the Lord kindled against us, because our fathers did not hear and obey all the words of this book concerning us." This is a telling revelation of Judah's spiritual decline to this point, as the rediscovery of Deuteronomy exposed the chasm between the covenant of God and the obligations of Judah. Deuteronomy contains such prohibitions on the explicit basis that this is what defiled the nations before Israel. Among these forbidden acts are human sacrifice, divination and sorcery, mediums, and necromancy. When Josiah tears his clothing in grief, it indicates a genuine fear of just how lost Judah had become in the reign of Manasseh, as he had adopted all of these practices from Assyria and beyond. Without hesitation, Josiah seeks out the advice of someone from the prophetic school for confirmation of this national sin. Interestingly, a reply does come back to him, not from Zephaniah or Jeremiah, but from a different prophet altogether, a woman named Huldah. "I will bring calamity upon this place, for they forsook me and burned incense to other gods. But as for the king of Judah, because your heart was turned, and you humbled yourself before my face, and tore your clothes and wept before me, I have heard you. Your eyes shall not see the calamity I will bring on this place." It's the scholarly consensus that Josiah's repentance spares his generation from what is to come, and what is to come would be described in the events of the Babylonian exile in the 580s BC. Despite this impending calamity, Josiah was empowered to complete his reforms, this time with the guidance of the Book of the Law. Summoning the nation into one place, Josiah read the Book of Deuteronomy aloud and renewed the covenant in an act of national repentance. Following this, 2 Kings records a final, decisive act of reform. With the help of the priests, Josiah would root out any remaining practices of human sacrifice and idolatry. He removed the chariot of the sun, an image dedicated to the Assyrian solar deity Shamash that was stationed at the entrance of Solomon's temple. This deity was invoked by Assyrian kings when they wanted to emphasize divine legitimacy over a region, and its destruction was Josiah's cry of liberation. Finally, Josiah reinstated the Passover, the annual national observance celebrating God's historic redemption of the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. The Passover had not been widely practiced in over 400 years. Reinstituting the Passover and the other feasts was the best way to keep the traditions of Judah and Israel alive, as practicing these things in each individual household and collectively would strengthen Judah's cultural heritage. For all these reasons, Josiah was able to successfully consolidate the priestly service in the temple and rid the nation of its syncretic practices. After accomplishing so much in 622 BC, the 18th year of his reign, the Chronicles immortalize Josiah's legacy. There was no one like him before him, who turned towards the Lord with all his heart and all his soul and all his strength in all the law of Moses. No one arose like him afterward. This is the end of the biblical account following King Josiah, apart from his death in the year 609 BC. Before concluding, it's important to note that another apocalyptic event happened toward the end of Josiah's reign elsewhere in the ancient Near East. From 614 to 612 BC, the joint coalitions of Nabopolassar and Cyaxares successfully sacked and destroyed Nineveh, which brought about the end of the Assyrian Empire. As this destruction was previously promised through the prophets Zephaniah and Nahum, Josiah was able to witness this final destruction of the empire that had dominated the kingdom of his grandfather's time. The confirmation from the prophets and the reforms themselves taught a valuable lesson to Judah, just as it teaches us today, that zeal and proper devotion leads to a time of great illumination, of great reform, and great deliverance from evil. These are the acts of Josiah. Thanks for watching.